Hey everyone! Before we get started, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far this community reaches. And while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe. Alright, let's jump into today's video. The case of Tanya Jackson and Tatiana Dykes. In June 1997, a man and his daughter stumbled upon a dismembered torso in a plastic container at Hempstead Lake State Park in New York. Years later, in February 2011, the skeletal remains of a child were found near Jones Beach, eventually linked to the same unidentified woman through DNA. But they would only be identified more than a decade later. On June 28, 1997, a chilling discovery was made in Hempstead Lake State Park, located in Lakeview, New York. While walking through the wooded area, a man and his daughter came across a Rubbermaid container. Inside, it was a woman's dismembered torso, along with a floral pillowcase and a red towel. The victim's head, arms, and lower legs had been removed and were never recovered. The container was found approximately 200 yards north of Peninsula Boulevard, near McDonald Pond, on the west side of Lake Drive. With no immediate clues to the victim's identity, the investigation initially stalled. One of the only identifiable features on the body was a tattoo located on the woman's left breast. Hoping to generate leads, the investigators shared an image of the tattoo in a national tattoo magazine. Their efforts paid off when Steve Cullen, a tattoo artist from Connecticut, came forward. He recalled giving the tattoo to a young black woman, estimated to be around 18 or 19 years old, who had visited his shop with an aunt and cousin. During the appointment, she mentioned being from either the Bronx or Long Island, and said she was staying in Connecticut due to issues with a boyfriend. The investigators began referring to her as Peaches based on the tattoo design. In April later, more human remains were found near Jones Beach State Park. DNA testing conducted in December 2016 confirmed that the newly discovered remains belonged to the same individual known as Peaches. Additionally, the remains of a young child were located nearby. Forensic testing revealed that the child, identified only as Baby Doe, was the biological daughter of Peaches. This development confirmed the victims were mother and daughter, though their true names were still unknown at that time. Although this significant breakthrough provided clarity about the victims' relationship, the case remained unresolved. After another 4 years went by in 2020, the investigators intensified their efforts to identify the unknown woman and child by turning to advanced forensic methods. Nassau County authorities and the FBI partnered with Othram. Through their analysis, the Othram scientists determined that the woman known for years only as Peaches was Tanya Denise Jackson, originally from Alabama and born on October 22, 1970. Using the same genetic techniques, researchers were also able to identify the young child found near Jones Beach State Park. She was confirmed to be Tatiana Marie Dykes. After decades without answers, Nassau County Police formally revealed their identities to the public on April 23, 2025. The authorities explained that the delay in the announcement was necessary to properly notify relatives and to make burial arrangements. Tanya served in the United States Army between July 1993 and February 1995, during which time she was stationed in Texas, Georgia, and Missouri. After completing her military service, she moved to Brooklyn, New York, where she found work at a medical office, possibly as a medical assistant. Tatiana was born on March 17, 1995 in Texas. At the time of their demises, Tanya was no longer in contact with her family, and neither she nor her daughter had ever been officially reported missing. Tanya and Tatiana were eventually laid to rest in their home state of Alabama, receiving full military honors in recognition of Tanya's service in the U.S. Army. The discovery of their remains in locations not far from the sites connected to the Gilgo Beach serial crimes raised questions about a possible link. That case involves a series of unsolved crimes, mostly of female prostitutes, found along Long Island's South Shore. Although Tanya and Tatiana were found in areas close to those crime scenes, law enforcement has not confirmed any connection between their demises and the Gilgo Beach investigation. In 2023, Rex Huberman was arrested and charged in several of the Gilgo Beach cases, but he has not been implicated in ending the lives of Tanya and her daughter. Despite identifying the victims, the case remains unsolved. The investigation is ongoing, with detectives still working to uncover what happened and who was responsible. The authorities continue to appeal to the public for any information that could help bring the case to a close. A reward of $25,000 is being offered for details that lead to an arrest and conviction. Law enforcement is particularly interested in speaking with anyone who may have interacted with Tanya during her time in Brooklyn. The case of Angela Christine Mack. Angela Christine Mack was born on March 16, 1982 in Escondido, California. Just after middle school, her family relocated to Salem, Arkansas, in Fulton County. Their home was set in farming country in the foothills of the Ozarks. Angela was described as outgoing and fun. She quickly made a close circle of female friends. A friend of hers by the name of Tiffany Thomas described her. She was short and spunky, outgoing and dramatic, loud but so much fun. She was always trying to make people laugh, pulling a prank, or playing a joke on someone. In 1998, 16-year-old Angela had a son named Michael with her husband Tommy Ritu. The marriage did not work out, so Tommy and Angela got divorced. In February, Angela had another son, Matt, with Jeremy Niederbrack. This relationship was also short-lived. In February 2002, Angela married James Cox. They lived in Salem, Arkansas. On May 29, 2002, Angela and James were involved in a head-on two-car fatality crash on State Highway 9 in Fulton County. Angela and James sustained serious injuries but survived. The driver of the other vehicle, Susan Maines, passed away the next day in a Missouri hospital. The passenger, Lacey Maines, lost her unborn child. A lot of information about what happened after the accident is unknown. We do know that on September 1, 2002, Michael Ratu was reported missing by his father. Michael was last seen with Angela, who was also missing. Strangely enough, Angela was only reported missing in February 2004 by her mom 2 years later. It is not known why her husband at the time, James Cox, or anyone else did not report her missing earlier. It honestly appears as if investigators only bothered looking into the two disappearances in February 2020. It was then that a new investigator, Dale Weaver, came out of retirement to look for leads in the cold case. He decided to make a timeline of the disappearances and also interview family and friends of Angela. After some investigating, Dale found that James and Angela went to the hospital after the car crash. James's brother, Jeremy Cox, went to pick up Angela and her son Michael from the hospital in Missouri. Jeremy was arrested for being in possession of a stolen vehicle. This left Michael and Angela stuck in Missouri. The two of them made their way to a farm owned by Clarence and Barbara Cruson. In October 2020, Dale Weaver contacted Barbara. She said that she remembered meeting Angela and Michael. Barbara claims that she and her husband, Clarence, signed papers to adopt Michael and that Angela went to California. After a few weeks, Angela changed her mind and wanted to stop the adoption. She then made her way back to the Cruson's farm in Missouri to pick up Michael. Barbara said that the last time she saw Angela and Michael was on September 1, 2002. In April 2021, investigators got Barbara to take a polygraph test. She failed. After the test, Barbara decided to confess. She told them that her husband, Clarence, took the lives of Angela and Michael. He then got rid of the evidence by burning their bodies in a furnace. Investigators could not question him as his life was taken in February 2012. Investigators believe Barbara and now see this case as solved. There are, however, still a lot of questions. Her family still does not know where her remains are. It also does not make sense to me how her husband did not report her missing after he was released from the hospital. The motive for the crime seems to be that Clarence was greatly angered by Angela changing her mind regarding the adoption. The case of Christopher James Bush. Christopher James Bush lived in Waikato, New Zealand in 1987. He had a wife and 2 daughters. Christopher owned the Red Fox Tavern. On the evening of October 24, 1987, he found himself in his office busy counting the money they made that night. A few of his staff members were busy closing up. Just after 11 p.m., 2 heavily disguised men came running into the tavern. One of them had a shotgun and the other had a bat. Christopher tossed a glass at the head of one of the attackers, but he missed and hit a framed photo behind him. Christopher was then fatally shot. The 2 attackers made off with almost $40,000. Investigators were quickly on the scene. They collected some pieces of evidence that they believed could be useful later. Over 200 persons of interest were identified by investigators based on witnesses. Most of them were ruled out as they had alibis. On Christmas Eve 1987, a man by the name of Philip Dunbier came forward telling investigators he knew who committed the crime. He agreed to wear a wire and go talk to one of the attackers. In their conversation, the attacker admitted he was involved in the robbery. Investigators, however, did not believe it was enough to make an arrest at the time. They did question the 2 men that could potentially be the attackers. One of them was Michael Hoaged and the other had not been named yet. The unnamed man had just been released from prison for an armed robbery a few days before Christopher's death. Michael was also no stranger to committing such crimes. Over the years, investigators found more evidence against these 2 men. They had far more money to spend directly after the crime, and they were also seen near the tavern. The unnamed man also had the same shotgun that was used, and he tried to get rid of it shortly after the crime. In February 2021, investigators believed they had enough evidence, and the case went to trial that month. In February, Michael and the unnamed man were found guilty of murdering Christopher. The case of Douglas Hollowell Brick. In October 1973, a 23-year-old man left his dormitory and was never seen again. For nearly 5 decades, the case remained a haunting mystery until a chance discovery brought a breakthrough. Douglas Hollowell Brick was born on October 12, 1950 to Harold and Donna Hollowell Brick. He spent his early years in Pocatello, Idaho. As a student at Pocatello High School, Douglas graduated in 1968 as a top scholar. He actively participated in multiple school organizations, including the Boys' Council, Key Club, and German Club. He also served as a delegate to Boys State, showcasing his leadership potential. With clear ambitions for his future, he enrolled at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City to continue his education. On his 20th birthday on October 12, 1973, Douglas was last seen leaving Austin Hall, his dorm on campus. His car was later found parked nearby, and inside were his belongings, packed with care, implying that he may have been preparing to go somewhere. Near the vehicle, the investigators found his wallet discarded on the ground. These clues immediately raised concerns, especially after further investigation revealed troubling details about Douglas's recent behavior. Prior to his disappearance, Douglas had taken several unusual steps. He had withdrawn from many of his university classes and closed his bank accounts. Even more concerning, records showed that he had purchased a gun and 500 rounds of .22 ammunition. When his dorm room was searched, it was discovered that 1 box of the ammunition was missing. These findings prompted an extensive search effort by the University of Utah Police and Salt Lake County Search and Rescue. They focused on the foothills behind the university campus. Despite their efforts, no trace of Douglas was ever found. After the initial investigation, a friend came forward claiming to have seen Douglas driving a truck on the route between Ogden, Utah, and Pocatello, Idaho. According to the friend, Douglas said that he had left college and was planning to begin a new life. He reportedly asked that his family not be told of his whereabouts. However, this sighting became the last known contact. For decades, Douglas' disappearance remained unsolved. Lost police records, fruitless search efforts, and varying accounts of his last movements kept the case shrouded in uncertainty. After almost 5 decades in 2022, the University of Utah Police Department brought in a crime data analyst named Nicole Mitchell. While working with Utah's statewide Information and Analysis Center, Mitchell uncovered a forgotten cold case, Douglas Brick's disappearance. At the time, Major Heather Stursniger was serving as the investigation's lieutenant. Upon learning about the overlooked case, she agreed without hesitation to reopen it. Detective John Dial was assigned to the investigation after Stursniger received a promotion, but he quickly realized the case file offered very little to begin with. As they began piecing together what they could, one lead came from a journal entry written by Douglas's mother, Donna. In the entry, she recalled a meeting with a psychic shortly after her son's disappearance. The psychic allegedly described specific details, including the claim that Douglas had gone to the foothills above the university campus. Though unconventional, this clue aligned with a location that had been extensively searched back in 1973. The first real breakthrough came when investigators found a record of a 2018 phone call from Douglas's sister to University Dispatch, inquiring about her brother's case. That call became the starting point for a more targeted effort. Using the information from that call, Detective Dial traveled to California to meet with Douglas's sister. During the visit, she provided a DNA sample via cheek swab, hoping it would help identify her brother if he had ever been listed as a John Doe in the national system. The sample was submitted for comparison, but the results yielded no matches. Despite the setback, Douglas's sister also provided Dial with contact details for his girlfriend at the time of his disappearance. The woman was living out of state and offered helpful background about Douglas, although nothing concrete emerged to suggest a new direction for the search. Months passed without a breakthrough, and the case remained unsolved until October 2024. That month, a group of hunters stumbled upon human remains, specifically skull fragments, in the foothills near the University of Utah. The discovery was immediately flagged and DNA testing was ordered. In May 2025, the results came back with a match to the DNA sample provided by Douglas' sister. At last, the decades-long mystery of what happened to Douglas had a definitive answer. The remains were his. Following the DNA confirmation, the University of Utah Police formally closed the case, even though it could not be confirmed how he lost his life. On May 3, 2025, Douglas's family was notified of the results. The family said in a statement, "We never stopped hoping for answers about Doug's disappearance. We are relieved to finally have some answers." After 52 years, this result, while sad, is nothing short of a miracle. The case of Lori Nesson. 15-year-old Lori Nesson lived in Columbus, Ohio in 1974. She attended Eastmore High School. Nesson performed well in school, becoming an honor student during her academic career. On September 27, 1974, she attended a high school football game. After the game was over, she went to a house party. Just after midnight, she started walking home. Lori Nesson would sadly never make it home. The next day, her body was found on the west side of Reynoldsburg, Ohio, in a ditch. Her clothes were scattered across several miles. An autopsy was done and it was determined that she passed away due to asphyxia of undetermined origin. This meant that investigators did not believe someone took her life. The family pleaded with investigators to reopen the case, and they finally did in February 2019. A new coroner decided to review the case. He determined as someone definitely took Lauren Ason's life. In December aired a broadcast on the Lori Nesson case. That night, a viewer called Reynoldsburg police with information I could finally solve the case. The woman said what happened to Lori was very similar to what happened to her cousin Karen Adams. In March of 1975, 17-year-old Karen Adams left her home in Whitehall, Ohio. She told her parents that she was going to a girlfriend's house to pick up some clothes she had left there, but she actually planned to meet up with her boyfriend at a supermarket. Karen's body was found the next day in a ditch about 6 miles from her home. she had been assaulted and strangled. There are a lot of similarities between the two cases. Both Karen and Lori were teenagers, found in a ditch and passed away within a few months of one another. Karen's case was solved over. In February 2011, Robert Mayer was arrested in connection to her case and convicted in February 2012 as his DNA was found at a crime scene. Mayer passed away just a few years after being imprisoned. There were DNA samples from 2 different men found at Karen's crime scene, but investigators were unable to identify the man. Karen's cousin believed Mayer could be responsible for what happened to Lori Nesson as well, and that is why she called investigators. In 2021, DNA testing was done to see if Mayer was indeed responsible for taking the life of Lori. It was discovered that there were also DNA from 2 men found at Lori's crime scene. One of the DNA samples matched the DNA of Robert Mayer. Investigators believed that the other DNA sample could potentially belong to Charles Weber. He was a friend of Mayer and they both served time together in prison. Weber passed away in 1992 and he was cremated. Investigators had to get a DNA sample from Weber's son. It was then confirmed that Robert Mayer and Charles Weber took the life of Lori Nesson. It was also discovered that the man involved in taking the life of Karen Adams was in fact Charles Weber. Investigators believe that these 2 men committed more crimes and they are investigating it. Detective Chuck Clark from the Franklin County Sheriff's Office had this to say, "I always had a feeling these 2 guys were responsible for more and what they were called for. They would drink, drive around the city, wherever, and they would approach girls and young women and were by themselves." The case of Nicole Ford. Manipulation is a special psychological technique that allows one to achieve personal goals without considering the partner's interests. Notably, a skilled manipulator keeps people they need close to them for years using various tactics, methods, and approaches in intimate relationships. Such manipulation usually makes the other party doubt the correctness of their decisions, feel guilty, and can significantly undermine their self-esteem. Typically, relationships with a manipulator start off ideally as these individuals know how to gain trust, charm, and win hearts. They appear caring, understanding, empathetic, and someone with whom one can share joys and sorrows at any time. Gradually, they probe your weaknesses and begin to exploit them. Sometimes, such individuals even commit serious crimes through others in such a way that the manipulated person believes they are acting entirely of their own volition or for the greater good. The case of Nicole is not unique, but it serves as a vivid example of how a man can skillfully manipulate the emotions of women who are in love with him. He kept one lover from leaving for many years, destroying her emotional state with his actions and convincing her that she could not live without him. He persuaded another lover to commit a crime, convincing her it was a righteous act to save a child. He planned everything down to the last detail, but recordings from street surveillance cameras did not allow him to escape accountability. What is known about Nicole, or simply Nicole Ford, was born on July 11, 1989 in the northern part of the US in a small town in Minnesota. There was almost no information about her parents and early life in public sources. According to some reports, her father left the family when she was very young and her mother raised her alone, striving to provide her daughter with everything necessary and a good education. Nicole was one of the top students in her school, and she was also actively involved in sports from a young age, particularly track and field and martial arts, in which she excelled. In her senior years of school, she decided that she wanted to dedicate her life to fighting crime and would serve in law enforcement. She did everything possible to successfully pass the exams and meet the physical standards required for admission to the police academy, graduating with honors. After finishing school and being admitted to the academy, Nicole moved from the small provincial town to the large metropolis of Minneapolis. In 2010, she was accepted into the Criminal Investigation Department of the main police headquarters in Minneapolis as an assistant investigator. And after several years of dedicated service, she was appointed as an investigator. Colleagues described her as a determined, goal-oriented woman and a fearless officer ready to take risks. However, in her personal life, without realizing it, Nikki became a pawn in the hands of a sophisticated manipulator. The perfect start to a doomed relationship. In February 2012, at a Taekwondo competition, 23-year-old Nicole met a coach and martial arts master, Timothy Tim Ama, who was 8 years her senior and initially didn't spark much interest in her. However, the slender young beauty with luxurious long hair and a charming smile immediately caught his attention. It's worth noting that Timothy was known as a ladies' man with numerous romantic partners, whom he frequently changed and sometimes dated several women at the same time. He was skilled in winning over women he liked and was not accustomed to rejections. Timothy also lived in Minneapolis, quickly found out where Nikki trained, and obtained her phone number. He initially offered her personal training services but almost immediately began courting her, quickly winning over her heart. Nicole saw Tim as a kind, open, and charming man. She developed a sincere affection for him, and before she knew it, she had fallen deeply in love. Soon, they started a romantic relationship and began dating. Initially, the man behaved gallantly, showed care, and made every effort to demonstrate that he was a reliable person one could depend on. Amahara was strong, intelligent, eloquent, and had the ability to dominate the women who fell in love with him. The relationship progressed rapidly, and after a month and a half, they decided to move in together and live under the same roof. The 6 months went wonderfully, and Nicole felt happy and loved next to this person. She opened up and trusted him, believing there were no secrets between them. However, Timothy's behavior gradually began to change. He revealed his true nature, but he did so subtly enough that his chosen one was not alarmed for quite some time. The sophisticated tormentor, Timothy was an attractive, witty, and charismatic man with a muscular build, enjoying success with the opposite gender. He took great pride in himself, and even after entering into a serious relationship, he did not stop flirting with other women, often doing so in Nicole's presence, which deeply hurt her and made her feel humiliated. Nicole hoped that over time, her boyfriend would shake off his bachelor habits, become more restrained, and settle down. But months passed and nothing changed. Meanwhile, Tim assured her that he loved only her and was passionate and tender as a partner. But outside the home, he did not miss a single opportunity to flirt and regularly engaged in affairs. Soon, Tim became openly annoyed by his girlfriend's jealousy. He began to snap at her, stating that he would behave as he wanted and she had no right to tell him otherwise. However, he usually apologized afterward, telling Nicole that no one would ever love her as much as he did, and she forgave him, continuing to make future plans. In the fall of 2014, during a minor domestic argument, Timothy unexpectedly flew into a rage, grabbed Nicole by the throat, and squeezed so hard that she couldn't breathe and almost lost consciousness. Suddenly, he came to his senses, let Nicole go, and pushed her so hard that she fell, hitting a wall. At that moment, she realized that this was an unhealthy relationship that needed to be ended immediately. However, her emotional attachment to the man was too strong, and it only took another apology from him for her to forgive him. In addition to bouts of aggression and infidelity, another extremely unpleasant trait of Tim's came to light. He was extremely jealous and obsessed with control. The man monitored every step his chosen one took her phone without permission, checked her contact lists, messages in messengers and social networks, and kept a close eye on who she talked to and where she was. This continued for several years. Tim could cause a scandal out of nowhere, unjustly accusing his beloved of infidelity. While he himself did not miss an opportunity to be unfaithful, he often resorted to physical violence but continued to convince Nicole that no one would ever love her as he did if she ever attempted to leave. When ending the relationship, the man resorted to blackmail, claiming that he would end his life and it would be on her conscience. In November 2015, after another argument that ended in violence, Nicole packed her bags and, with a suitcase in hand, left the house. Timothy, who until the last moment did not believe she would do it, saw his partner leaving, chased her down outside, grabbed her by the hair, and dragged her back into the house. But the woman began to scream and struggle, attracting the attention of neighbors, and the man was forced to back down, letting her go. After so many years in an abusive and manipulative relationship, Nicole could finally breathe a sigh of relief. However, Tim had no intention of leaving her alone. He merely switched tactics, moving from threats and blackmail back to romantic pursuits. He met her after work, sent flowers to her home, wrote messages filled with tenderness, and pleaded for a chance to start over. For over a month, Nicole was resolute and had no plans to return to her former lover. But in December of that same year, she unexpectedly discovered that she was pregnant. This was certainly not in her plans, but the thought of not keeping the baby never crossed her mind. She knew that if her ex-boyfriend found out about her pregnancy, it would provide him with perfect leverage for manipulation in an attempt to win her back. So she tried to hide her pregnancy but was unsuccessful. They still shared many mutual friends and acquaintances. So by January 2016, information about her expecting a child reached Timothy. There was no doubt about who the father was, prompting him to urge her to return to him, arguing that their child should be raised in a complete family. Nicole, who had grown up without a father herself, understood how challenging it would be for her and the baby, but she also realized that a life with a manipulative and cruel person would not lead to anything good. She adamantly refused to return to her ex-boyfriend, though she still had feelings for him, but she noted that she would allow him to participate in the life and upbringing of their child as a nominal father. On June 20, 2016, Nicole gave birth to a healthy boy whom she named Callahan America, as her former lover acknowledged paternity and declared his readiness to raise the child with her. However, it soon became clear that giving the baby this man's surname and registering him as the parent was far from the best idea. Despite Tim's assurances that he would be a good father and his pleas to reunite so that Callahan could grow up in a complete family, in reality, he showed no interest in his son. The man had hoped that the child would become a reliable tool for manipulating his ex-girlfriend, but Nicole was no longer susceptible and Amir quickly lost interest in the baby. Nicole took nearly a year of maternity leave and devoted herself entirely to caring for her little son. She hadn't even thought about new relationships, immersing herself completely in motherhood. Meanwhile, Timothy continued his carefree life with numerous lovers and casual connections. It got to the point where he had a signal, a purple light in his bedroom, which meant that the homeowner was alone and expecting company. Any of his lovers could respond to this signal, and after which the purple light would go out, signaling to others that Tim's bed was already taken. It was like something out of a red light district, but the man and his numerous partners were quite satisfied with this arrangement. In the same year of 2016, shortly after the birth of Callahan, 36-year-old Umair moved in and began living with his 18-year-old protege named Colin Issen. He had been training the young woman since she was 14, and she was deeply in love with her mentor despite the significant age difference. Initially, the couple hid their close relationship into outsiders. They claimed that Colin was just renting a room in his house. However, it soon became apparent to everyone that a fiery romance was unfolding between the coach and his ward. Timothy was thrilled with his young lover, and according to friends, the girl resembled a naive child trying her hardest to impress the man she absolutely adored. By the summer of 2017, Nicole was forced to return to work. She was raising her child alone as the boy's father was hardly any help and the young mother simply ran out of money, prompting her to end her maternity leave early. At that time, she was working as a forensic expert at the main police headquarters in Minneapolis, and her work schedule could be unpredictable. During the day, little Callahan was in daycare, but if his mother was held up at work or called in unexpectedly, she would ask Timothy to look after their son. There were a few reasons for this. She believed it was beneficial for the boy to spend time with his father, who had recently vowed to be involved in his upbringing. Since her former lover was not helping financially, she thought he could at least save her the cost of nanny services. Amma did not enjoy spending time with the child. It was a burden to him, and he was unwilling to take on the responsibility. Thus, he shifted it along with all related troubles onto his young lover. Colin quickly developed a fondness for the little boy and loved taking care of him. Thus, the man dumped his parental responsibilities on the girl, explaining it by telling her that Nicole was a bad mother who did not want to care for her child and was looking for any excuse to offload her son onto them. In the February, Nicole, for the time since breaking up with Tim, entered into a romantic relationship. Her new partner was a fellow police officer named Donovan Ford. He treated his beloved with tenderness and care and also felt paternal towards Callahan, expressing readiness to adopt the boy. Everything seemed wonderful, but that was until Amar found out about his ex's new relationship. Timothy did not love Nicole and had long stopped trying to establish any relationship with her, but the mere fact that she was now not alone and happy enraged him. It also ignited a furious desire to annoy or completely destroy these relationships. As his main weapon in this endeavor, he decided to use their son as well as the naive Colin, who believed every word he said. The child's father regularly reported to social services that Donovan was beating, tormenting, and treating his son cruelly, and that the boy's mother was doing nothing to stop it. As a result, Child Protective Services frequently visited the family. They never managed to confirm any instance of domestic violence, but each time, Nicole and her new lover were interrogated like criminals. They knew who was trying to ruin their lives but were powerless to stop it. And this continued for years. Simultaneously, Timothy kept convincing Colin that Callahan was in danger, that Nikki and Donovan were cruel to him, and that one day, they might simply end his life in what they would claim was an accident. The girl believed her lover, felt terribly sorry for the boy who had literally grown up before her eyes, and was ready to protect him. Timothy literally harassed his ex and her new partner, threatened them, tried to provoke them, and even filed police reports claiming that these law enforcement officers were abusing their official powers, hoping they would be fired. Donovan tried to have a man-to-man talk with Timothy, but it yielded no results. The ex-boyfriend continued to terrorize his former girlfriend and her new boyfriend, turning their lives into a real nightmare. In the battle for the little son, Tim decided not to stop at just threats and harassment and soon took the matter to court, claiming his rights to the child and his desire for sole custody. Nicole did not anticipate this and was genuinely frightened. Knowing her ex's ability to lie and manipulate, she understood that he didn't actually want his son. He just wanted to get back at her for her happiness with Donovan. At the same time, Nicole finally decided to seek a restraining order against Timothy, citing his erratic behavior and the threat he posed. She was confident that the custody issue would likely resolve in her favor, but she also realized that the legal battles could drag on for years as Tim was not one to back down easily. Meanwhile, Timothy continued to poison his ex-girlfriend's life, conking various fabrications. He even tried to accuse her of attempting to take his life, claiming she had tried to run him over with her car. He claimed that he managed to jump away just in time and that Nicole only ran over his foot. Astonishingly, he took this case to court, but he couldn't prove anything since there were no witnesses, no camera footage, and importantly, no actual injury. In September 2022, the custody case went to court. The man once again tried to slander his former lover, accusing her of harming their child, and even secured support from Colin, who corroborated his story. He also tried to persuade little Callahan to say that his mom and Donovan were hitting him. But the child not only refused to lie but also revealed that his father was coaxing him to lie by promising him sweets. The court took the child's account into consideration and awarded sole custody to the mother. Nicole was about to breathe a sigh of relief, but Timothy persisted and appealed the decision. Initially, he secured the right to see the child once a week under the mother's supervision, and later, he was allowed to spend time alone with the boy without Nicole's presence, which greatly upset and frightened her as anything could be expected from him. Ultimately, after several more court appeals and to avoid further disputes, Timothy was allowed to see his son at a specialized family center designed to prevent parents in conflict from encountering each other and causing further psychological damage to the children. The facility had multiple separate parking lots and separate entrances, so one parent could bring the child for the other parent to meet, but the ex-spouses did not interact or even see each other. The mysterious attacker. On April 19, 2022, when Nicole arrived at the family center to pick up her son after another visit with his father, something unforeseen happened. She parked her car and was heading towards the entrance, but she didn't make it inside. Suddenly, a person dressed in black clothing, a mask, and a hood approached her, pulled out a gun, and shot her 4 times at close range, then quickly disappeared in an unknown direction in a black pickup. Incredibly, Nicole not only remained conscious but also managed to dial emergency services. However, she couldn't convey anything to the dispatcher. One of the bullets hit her neck, missing the carotid artery by a millimeter and damaging her vocal cords so she could only make gurgling sounds. At that moment, a woman who happened to witness the event came to her aid. She was just passing by when she heard the shots and saw the fleeing black figure jump into a vehicle and disappear. The woman quickly pulled over, made sure the shooter had left, and then rushed to help the victim. She was the one who explained to the dispatcher what had happened, provided the address, and pressed her clothing against Nicole's wounds to stop the bleeding, saving her life. The victim spent several days teetering on the brink of life and death in a coma. She lost a lot of blood and her vital organs were affected. But despite the severity of her injuries, doctors managed to stabilize her condition. Medical professionals believed Nicole was incredibly lucky as death was only millimeters away from 2 bullets. One passed near an artery and the other nearly struck her heart. The woman survived and now it was necessary to figure out who wanted her dead. Prime suspect, Nicole had no doubt that her ex-lover was the one who had shot her, which she reported to the police as soon as she regained consciousness. Earlier, while the woman was in a coma, Donovan had also informed the police that apart from Timothy, the victim had no other enemies. Timothy was indeed interrogated and checked, but he had a solid alibi as he was at the family center with his son at the time of the attack, confirmed by staff and internal surveillance footage. Simultaneously, the theory was investigated that someone among the criminals she had previously arrested and helped incarcerate individuals who might have organized the attack on the police officer and investigator. Undoubtedly, due to her profession, she could have had ill wishes, but Nicole herself was convinced that Timothy was involved in the assassination attempt. At the scene, 4 casings were found and a camera at the nearest intersection captured a suspicious black Dodge Ram pickup running a red light without license plates. This same vehicle was mentioned by the eyewitness who had essentially saved the victim's life. Thus, it was necessary to check what vehicles Timothy owned. During another interrogation, the suspect mentioned that he had a Chevrolet Traverse SUV in his garage and he also owned a Dodge Challenger. However, according to Timothy, he never had a pickup. Yet, the investigation showed that the man was lying and a black Dodge Ram, identical to the one used by the shooter, was registered in his name. Once the truth emerged, Timothy was arrested pending further investigation. When shown the surveillance footage, he recalled that he did indeed have such a vehicle but claimed he rarely used it and it mostly sat idle. Moreover, he noted that his pickup had colorful stickers on the doors and hood. This was verified and indeed his vehicle had stickers, but they looked as though they had been applied just recently. Nonetheless, all the evidence was circumstantial and law enforcement needed to find the weapon and the actual shooter to fully resolve the case. It turned out that Timothy's vehicle was equipped with a satellite navigation system, which allowed the tracing of the vehicle's entire route on that day. It was discovered that the car was brought to the back entrance of a school on the evening of April 18th. There it remained all night and almost the entire next day. Road cameras traced that the vehicle arrived there with license plates, but by the next evening, it left without them. The person who used the vehicle that day was of short stature, slight build, and from a distance, the silhouette appeared feminine. As a result, it was decided to immediately detain and interrogate Timothy's live-in girlfriend, Colin Larson. A search was also conducted at the couple's home. And although the weapon used in the crime was not found, law enforcement discovered ammunition of the same caliber used by the shooter. The frightened girl almost immediately began to give confessional testimony, confirming that Timothy was the mastermind behind the crime. However, Colin believed that her lover had acted with good intentions, thinking they were trying to radically save little Callahan from a cruel mother. Timothy had spent years manipulating his trusting young girlfriend, convincing her that the boy was being mistreated and subjected to violence, and she unquestioningly believed every word her lover said. She felt immensely sorry for the child and believed that Timothy wished his son well and wanted to protect him. The trial of the conspirators began in November of the same year. Colin confessed that her lover had provided her with the firearm and had taken the pistol back after the assassination attempt and disposed of it, but she did not know what exactly he did with it. The prosecution was largely built on circumstantial evidence, a point that the defendant's lawyers emphasized. Nevertheless, the decisive factor was Colin's confession, who still could not believe that her lover had deceived her and believed that they were committing a righteous act. The court also considered the testimony of the victim herself about what kind of person Timothy was and how skillfully he had always managed to manipulate the women who loved him. 42-year-old Timothy was found guilty of organizing a degree attempted murder, as well as incitement and aiding and abetting. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison, the maximum term for such cases. 24-year-old Colin Larson, as the executor, received 16 years in prison. A year after the assassination attempt, Nicole managed to fully recover physically and emotionally. She and Donovan officially legalized their relationship, and the man became the best father Callahan could ever wish for. The now married couple is expecting their child together, and the woman who saved Nicole's life then will be the child's godmother. Finally, it should be added that Timothy with good behavior will be eligible for parole in 2035. However, he will be prohibited from coming within 100 meters of his son, former lover, and her family members, and from attempting any form of contact with them. The case of Lloyd Perkins. 22-year-old Lloyd Perkins lived in Seaside, California in 1995. On September 21st, Lloyd was fatally shot by an unknown man on Amador Avenue in Seaside. The Seaside Police Department worked the case aggressively in the 1990s, and a lot of information came in, but there was never enough to pin down the suspect. In the early 2000s, the case was looked into again. Detectives made a little more headway and started to pin down people who were in the area at the time of the crime. In February 2010, Seaside Deputy Police Chief Nick Borges was working on a different case. During his investigation, he met Lloyd Perkins' mom, Gloria. She told him that her son's case was still unsolved. He promised her that he would not forget and that he would do everything in his power to make sure the case got solved. Recently, the Seaside Police Department joined the newly created Monterey County Cold Case Task Force. In April 2021, 40-year-old Anthony Randall was booked into the Monterey County Jail in connection to the case. Nick Borges said that people involved in the case had gotten older and were more willing to talk and share what they knew. The current detectives followed up on some leads, and they were able to identify several additional witnesses and get more information, really narrowing in on the suspect that they arrested. Some of these people had been interviewed in the past and things didn't go very far, so they really did some good follow-up on it and were able to corroborate what some of the witnesses were saying. We are very confident that Mr. Randall is responsible for taking the life of Lloyd Perkins in 1995. Nick Borges lived up to his promise. He was able to tell Lloyd's mom the good news that an arrest had been made. The case of Sabrina Paige Eisenberg. Sabrina Paige Eisenberg was born on June 27, 1997, in Valrico, Florida. When Sabrina was just 5 months old, on November 24th, her mother, Marlene Eisenberg, woke up at 6 a.m. and went to her kitchen. To her surprise, she noticed that the laundry room door was open. When she entered the laundry room, she discovered that the garage door was also open. Concerned, Marlene went to check on Sabrina. It was then that Marlene realized Sabrina was missing from her crib. The news of her disappearance sent shockwaves through the community, and the police immediately began their search for the missing infant. Upon investigation, the police learned that the Eisenbergs had accidentally left the garage door open overnight. They found an unidentified shoe print and a strand of blonde hair in Sabrina's room. However, despite these clues, the police turned their focus towards Sabrina's parents as potential suspects. Marlene and Steve Eisenberg denied any involvement, however. They claimed that they believed someone who couldn't have a baby of their own snuck into the house and took Sabrina. They also made a public appeal for whoever it was to come forward and bring Sabrina home safely. The police didn't buy it and took several items from the home for analysis. A video was taken of the Eisenbergs smiling brightly as they left the home just a day after Sabrina went missing. What also didn't help her case was when the police found a video that was taken by her parents just a few days before she disappeared. It showed Sabrina with a lot of bruises on her face and a patch of hair missing on her head. The Eisenbergs then hired a lawyer and said they will take the polygraph test. After the test, Marlene claimed had came back inconclusive. The police letter said it did not come back inconclusive, but they did not want to say whether she passed or failed. In November 1999, Steve and Marlene Eisenberg were arrested in connection with Sabrina's disappearance. However, they were released when a judge dismissed all charges against them. The case remained unsolved for several years until April 2003, when the police began to suspect that a young girl, known as Paloma, might be Sabrina. DNA testing was conducted, but it was ultimately determined that Paloma was not Sabrina. In February 2017, a 20-year-old woman reached out to the Eisenbergs via Facebook, believing she could be Sabrina. She claimed that there were no records or photos to document the 5 months of her life, which raised further suspicions. Shortly after, another woman came forward with a similar belief that she could be Sabrina. Both women submitted DNA samples for testing, but to date, the results of these tests have not been made public. Speculation has arisen that if one of these women were Sabrina, the media would have covered the case extensively by now. The case of Kerry Watson. 29-year-old Kerry Watson lived in Johnson County, Kansas. He had a wife and children. In March of 1985, Kerry was heading home. When he got to his doorway, an unknown man snuck up on him and stabbed him several times. The man then went into Kerry's apartment and stole some items. Kerry sadly did not survive the stabbing. Investigators collected DNA evidence from inside the apartment and kept it to be used later. Investigators had some suspects, but they were never able to prove that any of these men committed the crime. Kerry's sister, Audrey Walker, always made sure that investigators never forgot Kerry Watson's case. In February 2021, with advances in DNA and a new set of eyes on the case, investigators finally found their man. In April 2021, 60-year-old Kata Rhymes was arrested in connection to the case in St. Louis, Missouri. Kate Meyer, who is a crime scene investigator for the Johnson County Sheriff's Office, said that forensic evidence collected at a crime scene back in 1985 was tested again in February 2020 and then led to the arrest in February 2021. Due to the quality of the original scene processing and subsequent evidence storage, it was possible for additional analysis to be performed and actionable results to be obtained all these years later. Kerry's sister Audrey said that when she heard the news, the tears just started flowing. It was just an overwhelming sense of thank you, God. There's some closure like true healing can begin. She also said that Kerry was a loving, caring, and compassionate spirit toward other people. Audrey said that her family never gave up hope. I understood that from 1985 to February 2021, there have been so many new processes in place for the criminal justice system that you cannot just walk away from what you did, even if it took so many years. The case of Megan Louise Rose. The sun had barely crept over the horizon when the lifeless body of Megan Louise Rose was discovered at the base of Point Cartwright Cliffs. July 18, 1997. The sharp morning light cast long shadows over the jagged rocks in the sea below, whispered secrets to the shore. Secrets that would remain buried for nearly 3 decades. Her car, parked neatly nearby, suggested a tragic end. A young woman driven to despair. The authorities ruled it as suicide. Megan Louise Rose was a 25-year-old dedicated nursing assistant specializing in disability and aged care. Friends described her as a compassionate, full of life, and deeply committed to her work in Markula, Queensland. Megan resided at Unit 3 of 51 Keith Royal Drive, Markula, with her Delaware facto partner, then 45-year-old Keith Lees, and his young son. Megan was reported to have left the unit in her vehicle at approximately 8 p.m. on the July 17, 1997, a day before the unfortunate discovery. Police initially believed she had taken her own life due to a high blood alcohol concentration, but her family never believed it. They insisted Megan wasn't the kind of person to take her own life. And as the years ticked by, the cracks in that ruling grew impossible to ignore. In February 2009, the Queensland Police reopened Megan's case, suspecting there was more to her death than met the eye. New evidence surfaced. Evidence that cast doubt on the original suicide ruling. Investigators discovered that Lee had allegedly taken out a life insurance policy in Megan's name shortly after her death. Combined with inconsistencies in the initial forensic reports, the case was reclassified as suspicious. Then in February 2022, there was a fresh investigation by cold case detectives. The following year, they announced a $500,000 reward for information leading to an arrest. Homicide detectives visited a home in Victoria in June of 2023 to speak with Lees, then aged 70, concerning their investigation. A day later, Lees had disappeared, with his car found abandoned in Portland. But he didn't disappear into the wilderness. He disappeared into society. Under the alias David, Lees crisscrossed Australia, slipping through the cracks of the system with falsified documents, a driver's license, and a pensioner card. He collected government welfare and enjoyed the comforts of subsidized housing. Even religious groups, unaware of the man's dark past, offered him shelter and support. Lees evaded justice, but he couldn't run forever. In July of 2023, police issued Lees an arrest warrant and continued searching for him. He was spotted on CCTV around Victoria in the ensuing days. Authorities said at the time, Lees may have been seeking casual work in the farming and fruit-picking industries. The public was warned not to approach him. While on the run, members of Lees' family publicly appealed for him to turn himself in, expressing concern for both his well-being and the need for justice for Rose's family. Due to the police's effort in seeking the help of the public, someone, somewhere, listening to a true crime podcast recognized David as Keith Lees. One anonymous tip. And just like that, the man who had eluded authorities for decades was finally within reach. After 18 months of evading authorities, Lees was arrested at a property on Kenthurst Road in Doral, New South Wales on January 2, 2024. During his arrest, he allegedly assaulted a police officer, biting them, a final desperate act of defiance from a man who had spent years avoiding accountability. In New South Wales, Lees faced charges related to identity fraud and assault after he allegedly bit a police officer during an encounter with law enforcement. These charges were later withdrawn to facilitate his extradition back to Queensland. Following his extradition, Lees appeared in Gord, where he faced charges for the alleged murder of Megan Louise Rose. His case is expected to continue through the legal system as authorities seek justice for the long unsolved crime. Queensland Police's reward offer of $500,000 is still standing. So if someone has more information regarding this case, please inform the authorities. The case of Jodine Sarin. Jodine Sarin was 39 years old when her parents, Art and Lois Sarin, went to visit her at her condo on Valentine's Day in February 2007. Although Jodine had a mental disability, she managed to live on her own, but still needed regular check-ins from her parents. That evening, when the Cerrones arrived, they noticed the lights inside were on. However, they couldn't enter because the front door was secured with a safety chain. After calling out to Jodine and getting no response, Art forced the door open. He walked into Jodine's darkened bedroom and was surprised to find an unidentified man having sex with his daughter. Art told the man to get dressed and leave. The parents waited in the living room to allow their daughter a moment of privacy. They expected an embarrassed couple to exit the bedroom, but no one did. After several minutes had passed, the Cerrones returned to the bedroom and were treated to a horrifying sight. Jodine's lifeless nude body was now lying on the bed. She had been beaten and strangled to death. Incredibly, Jodine's killer had been brazen enough to quietly sneak out of the condo before they discovered what he had done. Investigators later found that she had been dead for between 12 and 24 hours. Police have no leads, but they do have a complete genetic profile from DNA collected at the scene. A $52,000 reward is being offered for information that leads to an arrest in the case. In early 2017, Parabon Nanolabs applied their advanced technology, typically costing about $4 per scan, to analyze the DNA found at the crime scene using a cutting-edge method called phenotyping. This state-of-the-art process interprets genetic material to predict physical characteristics of the individual, such as skin tone, eye and hair color, gender, ancestry, and facial structure. It can even determine whether the person has freckles. According to the phenotyping results, the man who killed Jodine Sarin had very fair skin, green or blue eyes, blonde or brown hair, and some freckles. Investigators believe the suspect is likely in his 40s and of Northern European ancestry. Based on the eyewitness account provided by Jodine's father on the night of the murder, the suspect was described as a burly man with a flabby stomach and messy hair. Forensic evidence suggests the killer stood between 5 feet 8 inches and 6 feet tall. Despite the advanced tools and information gathered, the perpetrator of this horrific crime has yet to be brought to justice. Thank you so much for watching and exploring these cold cases with me. If you found the video interesting, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to NA Cold Cases for more deep dives into the unsolved and unexplained.